My name is John McCracken. I am the head brewer and owner of St. Pete Brewing Company, and today we're going to discuss kegging. Kegging is a process that you take finished beer and put it into a keg so you can send it out to bars or serve it on premises at your own place. The kegging process is different between breweries. It all matters the size of your brewery. Here we fill 1 to 3 kegs at a time. We're a pretty small brewery. If you go to another brewery that's bigger, they might have a machine that does it that fills 5 at a time. So kegging definitely will be a hands-on learning experience depending on the size of the brewery that you work at. The basic process is you'll have a finished beer. When I say finished beer, it is either filtered or transferred from the fermenter. It's in a bright tank. It's carbonated. And so basically what I will do now is I sanitize everything. I'll sanitize the valve, the keg fillers itself, the tops of the kegs. I'll hook everything up. We'll use CO2 to push the beer into the keg. There is also pressure in the keg that is back pressure. You need that back pressure so the beer doesn't foam. So when you fill the keg, it actually is full of beer and not half beer, half foam. We do have a keg washer, so that also is another big thing. If you're at a real small brewery, you might actually physically wash them by hand. We have a keg washer that washes, sanitizes, and puts pressure in the keg. So I have it set at 13 psi for the keg. I have my tank set at 15 psi. You always want to make sure your tank pressure is higher than your keg pressure, because if you don't, you're basically just going to push CO2 into the tank, which can cause your carbonation, affect your carbonation. Peracetic acid is a sanitizer that I use to sanitize basically anything in the brewery. I use it to sanitize my tanks, my keg fillers, the kegs itself, inside and out. It's just one of those sanitizers that I choose to use. There are multiple sanitizers out there that breweries can use. I think peracetic acid is probably one of the more popular ones. It's a strong acid, so you do have to dilute it down. Have to be very careful. Wear gloves, glasses, even a mouth if you don't want to breathe it in. It has a very strong odor to it when it's not diluted. I just think it does a really good job, and it's no foam. Is my biggest thing, is why I don't use any of the others. I'm going to fill 2 size kegs today. I can fill multiple sizes at a time. The 5-gallon usually only takes about a minute per keg, I would say, minute and a half. The 15.5 gallons is probably a 3 to 4 minute, 5-minute keg. And then you just kind of keep shuffling them in, and it also depends on how many kegs you want to fill that day. We usually fill about anywhere from 60 to 90 kegs in a day, and that only takes a few hours. Okay, so the kegging process, we are going to keg from this bright tank. I have our orange wheat in here. I've already have the CO2 hooked up to the tank. It is set at 15 psi. My kegs have a pressure of 13 psi, so you always want to have the pressure of your keg lower than the tank. So the next thing is sanitizing. That's major, important. You always want to make sure everything you're doing is clean. So I need to sanitize the valve, and I also sanitize the tops of the kegs. What I use for sanitizer, and each brewery uses different stuff, I use a diluted version of peracetic acid. So I spray that really well. I like to use my finger and get in there and make sure there's nothing in there. And then I spray it again. And I'll do the tops of the kegs. And this is just to ensure all these kegs have been cleaned. I just want to make sure the tops are also sanitized before I put the coupler in there. So now I need to hook everything to the tank. I have everything sitting in this bucket right here, which is also full of peracetic acid. So we are going to fill 3 kegs at a time today. Like I said, you could fill 1 keg at a time or up to probably 5. I prefer to only do 3 at a time. And that is because if I try to fill more than 3, I'll pull too much off of this tank and the pressure will drop too low. So this is your basic keg filler. It's just basically a hose with hooked to a coupler. So we always want to make sure these are shut or you're going to get covered in beer. So, like I said, we're going to do 3 at a time today. sure these are closed. So you want to make sure everything's nice and tight so you don't have any leaks. Okay, so all my fillers are hooked up. They're all closed. That's good, so I won't get beer on me. So now I can open up the tank. And then what I like to do is I like to bleed a little bit of beer out before hooking it up. So then basically you just hook it up just like you were tapping a keg. But this piece right here I have my thumb on. So basically I shut the coupler. I open up the valve that puts the beer in. I'll slowly release my thumb. So this piece actually allows me to walk away from this keg. It's releasing the pressure of the keg as the beer is flowing in. It's constant equal pressure, so there's no foaming. And when this keg fills, there's a little ball in here that'll shoot up and stop the release of pressure. So as long as this piece is working, I can walk away from this keg and go do something else. So now I'll set these up. The exact same way, just a smaller keg. So I'm going to set this one up a little bit differently. Same idea, but what I'm going to do is side press, and it's not going to allow me. Basically what I was going to do is I was going to open this. Some people will fill kegs without this piece. And if you do that, you really have to pay attention to the keg because when it's full, beer starts shooting out. So that's what you really have to pay attention to because you don't want to lose a lot of beer. Whole time doing this, I'm also keeping an eye on my head pressure, making sure that doesn't drop too far down. Like I said, when these are done filling, the balls, you hear the air coming out. The balls will pop up, stop the CO2 from coming out, and that's when you know it's full. I will also test it by lifting it just to make sure. Because sometimes these will stop working and just pop for no reason, and the keg will be half full. So you always have to pay attention and make sure everything's working properly. So the ball is popped, so I make sure I shut my valves before opening this. That way I don't get drenched in beer. So then what I want to do is wash the keg off, any beer. Hit it with some sanitizer. And then I want to drain whatever liquid might be on top of this keg off. And that way ensures that no mold will grow in there. And I just need to put a keg collar and a top on and it's good to go. So this will have the beer name, the date it was kegged, and the size of the keg. And it's ready for out in distribution. Every tank has a pressure gauge on it. And when filling kegs, I have the gauge set to 15 psi. If it drops to 13 or lower, I would stop kegging and let it build back up. And that reason is my kegs are all pressurized at 13 psi, and the kegs need to be a lower psi than the tank, or the beer will actually not flow into that keg. Every time you fill kegs, you're always going to get beer not only on the top of the keg, but it also runs down the sides. And that can get sticky. Also, like if you send it to a restaurant or what, it can attract bugs. So I just like to make sure the outside of my kegs are always clean. You don't have to use a blend. We use a blend because it's more cost effective. I do have two lines. One line is a blend and another line is just straight CO2. We use the straight CO2 when cleaning kegs. We use the blend when we're actually pouring the beer out of the taps. So it's more of a cost-effective more than anything. We don't have a big cooler here, so we have to keg the same day they pick up. If I fill 70 kegs, I have nowhere to put them but out here in the tasting room. So I would love to have a bigger cooler and keg a couple days ahead of time. But that's really the only advantage or disadvantage about kegging the same day. I clean my lines once a week, so I don't do it per keg. Every Monday, the first thing we do is clean our beer lines, and so we don't do it per keg or per tank. We just do it once a week. If we were to happen to change kegs, like different beers, we'll just flush the line really good before putting that beer on, and then the following Monday we'll clean the lines. The key things you need to take away is one, make sure your keg is properly pressured, so you have that back pressure to cause no foam. Depending on how you're kegging, there's certain times I can walk away and leave the keg by itself, but in some places you might have to stand there and keep an eye on it because beer will actually start coming out. And just pay attention to what you're doing, because you are working with CO2 and beer, and there are times I leave completely wet in beer because I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing.